Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Colony Drop, a Gundam podcast. My name is Brian.
And my name is Isaac. This is your favorite Gundam podcast where we talk about everything from Gundam anime series to movies to music, lore, gunpla, anything and everything that is related to Gundam.
And today, we're checking back in with our pal, Tobia Aranax.
Tobia.
From Crossbone Gundam.
The manga series that we read that I thought was going to be trash initially, and it ended up being one of the greatest Gundam things ever made.
So, Isaac, now that you love Crossbone Gundam so much, do you get a little bit nervous every time we go back to that Crossbone Gundam well to see, like, is the new one going to, like, fail to live up to your expectations?
To an extent, because the story ended so well, and Jupiter was so defeated that it's kind of like what comes after.
Right.
I would compare it almost to like Star Wars in a way. The Emperor was defeated in Return of the Jedi. The Empire is defeated. To continue on, what do we do? Like, where do we go from here? Yeah. It's got to be something pretty great. And if it doesn't stick the landing, it's going to stink.
It might taint the original for you, right?
Absolutely. They might Game of Thrones it.
Yeah.
Well, actually, no, that doesn't compare because that was just one ending that soured everything that came before. Not a new beginning that soured kind of the whole franchise. But anyways, I digress. Yes, I understand.
Isaac's just a little bitter, listeners, if you couldn't tell.
Yeah. I've reached the point in my life where so many of the things I've loved and cherished have just gotten ruined by corporate greed. But maybe it was always that way. Anyways.
So, listeners, today we're going to start our review of Mobile Suit Crossbone Gundam Steel 7. This is a 3-volume manga series that was published from May 2006 to July of 2007. You can basically find it on the internet, scanlated by various groups over the years. It is not officially available, just like all of Crossbone Gundam. Isaac, I don't really see any of Crossbone Gundam becoming available anytime soon in English.
No, it's not. So you need to hope a little bird whispers in your ear where to find it online.
That's right. In terms of background, Isaac, this is still written and illustrated by Yuichi Hasegawa. It's the same guy who wrote and illustrated Crossbone and Crossbone Skullheart, obviously with Tomino's input to some degree on the original. And the logline is, the year is UC 0136, shortly after the events of Mobile Suit Crossbone Gundam Skullheart. Bernadette Briette's stepmother, Europa Dogatie, flees to Earth to warn the Crossbone Vanguard that the Jupiter Empire is back and building a giant colony laser in order to destroy Earth. Tobia must race against time and agents of the Empire to recover a means with which to get to Jupiter and to recruit the best pilots he can muster for what seems to be a suicide mission.
Wow, that's a lot to take in.
It's a solid premise. I love suicide mission premises, Isaac, I'll be honest with you.
It's a solid premise, but at the same time, part of me is like, really? The Jupiter Empire is still kind of puttering around, threatening Earth? I thought we took care of this problem.
Yeah, well, you may be proven wrong, Isaac, so shall we jump into it?
Let's jump in with both feet.
So today, listeners, we're going to recap and review Volume 1. So, Chapter 1. Tonight, once again, Europa falls behind Zeus. Hasegawa always has the really good chapter titles. Very dramatic, this guy.
I love it. It matches the high quality of the whole series, of the whole franchise of this Crossbone Gundam.
It does. It does. So, as the logline stated, it is UC 0136, Isaac. This is 3 years after the original Crossbone Jupiter War. That means our man Tobia is now 18 years old. He's a full-fledged adult.
Wow. Time flies when you're saving the world.
So, Isaac, we start out with someone named Lady Europa under attack in her siren-looking suit, which I believe was called the Dionas. From the original Crossbone Gundam. She's under attack by Jupiter troops who are calling her a deserter, and they're saying, Sieg Dogatie. How's that for a Zeon callback?
Yeah, in death, much like Zeon Zemdaiken, Crux Dogatie has been deified. He's been raised to the level of legend and godhood, where they, his goons and his little minions, the followers, they'll invoke his name just like they do with Zeon.
Yeah. I was okay with it. I felt it was okay. It was appropriate.
I had to hold on to my chair because I got Zeon flashbacks.
You were like, oh, it's coming.
I was like, oh, the wind got knocked out of me. I'm going to need a glass of water.
Got a little excited there.
I was like, ooh, I better lay down.
So she is basically lost. She ejects and prays for help, and what appears but the Crossbone X1,
yay,
which is clearly being piloted by our man Tobia. As usual, Isaac, he shreds all the Jupiter forces. The entrance again here for the Crossbone was great, expelling the heat from the mouth vents. I maintain that this will look great in, 50 years when they animate this.
I hope so, yeah. Oh, God, can you imagine how crisp it'll look, too, with, modern animation? Man.
It'll look good. So obviously Tobia, he saves Europa, who was floating around in space because she ejected, and he gives her the terrible cover story again, Isaac, that he works for Black Rose Shipping, which we saw in Skullheart, and he takes her back to the ship. I don't know, that Black Rose Shipping, it doesn't really work for me when you're piloting the Crossbone Gundam, Isaac.
No, but I mean, it's such a thinly veiled, like, what a weak lie, right? It's paper thin.
I work for a shipping company. That's my Gundam, by the way.
We just happen to have top of the line military equipment protecting our shipping routes.
The mechanic Uman complains that he ruined yet another mantle and that they don't have the parts to keep fixing them, which I guess is this the author's way of saying this is why not everyone has a beam mantle?
I think so, and also showing that, even after victory over the majority of the Jupiter Empire's forces, they're still on this shoestring budget. If anything, they have less money because there's no mothership anymore. There's no Mother Vanguard.
That's true. They're still puttering around.
Even at the best of times, at their full strength, they had like the Gundams and then a handful of support mobile suits, right?
They were never a large force. This was a small strike team.
Now they can't even afford the beam mantles, the beam cloth.
Now they are delivering your Amazon Prime boxes.
All the way to Jupiter.
Yeah. So Europa doesn't believe this story, bless her heart, and she pulls a gun on Tobia, asking if they are the Crossbone Vanguard that killed Princess Tetanith. So obviously the ruse did not last long. And, here, Isaac, I gotta say, Europa, she's got major spacesuit cleavage. So Hasegawa is clearly a man of culture. And Crossbone, he gave us Rosemary Raspberry. And now we got Europa right off the bat. And spoilers, the two are going to meet up in this story, Isaac.
Will she be appearing on the Brian Boo bounce counter?
I think if we ever did a list, yeah, we'd have to put both of them on there for sure.
In combat, we can only imagine they'll be swaying to and fro. Just like Nataro and Ramius from Gundam Seed.
But Bernadette appears, welcoming Tobia back, which stuns Europa because Europa alludes that Bernadette should have returned to Jupiter so that she could have stopped something that Europa couldn't. She thought Bernadette was dead, and she's not, and all of a sudden she's on the same ship. So Tobia uses this opportunity to disarm her, and he kicks her into the wall, Isaac. He kind of overdoes it a little bit.
Does he? I mean, if she punctures the hull or like a viewport, I mean, they're all dead.
True. And then this causes Bernadette to scream, "Mom." So now the audience were like, oh no, that's Bernadette's mom, at least in some form. What did you think when she said mom, Isaac?
I thought to myself, I could have sworn Crux said she died. But then again, Crux is the source.
Are you telling me that Dogatie lied to you, Isaac?
In a stunning twist, the evil villains lied to us.
Never.
We weren't given the facts.
So yes, Europa turns out to be Bernadette's stepmom, so Dogatie's second wife. And Europa is very young. I think she's got to be, in her mid-20s at the latest?
Yeah, I doubt she's in her 40s.
Right.
Maybe low to mid-30s.
Yeah, she's not an age where she would be Bernadette's biological mom, typically. So the Crossbone Vanguard here jokes about one of their members, Yona, not understanding why Dogatie would want a young wife. And this joke is still relevant today, Isaac, with all this Prince Andrew, Jeffrey Epstein stuff in the news. I was like, here it is in my damn Crossbone Gundam.
Dogatie's responsible for Epstein's death.
He was riding on the Epstein Express.
Pretty much, yeah. He was a frequent flyer.
For Europa, for more ways than one in this story. But they then assign Bernadette to search Europa in the shower.
Of course.
So we have our once per volume shower scene quota check for Crossbone Gundam. So we already hit it, chapter 1.
Naturally.
Bernadette explains that she's accepted that she's now Bernadette and not really Tetanith anymore. But turns out she's been going out with Tobia, Isaac, for 3 years, but they haven't kissed. What's up with that?
This is firmly in Tobia's fault, right? Because as soon as, the enemy wreckage, the wreckage of the Divinidas was crumbling and burning, that's when you plant the kiss, right?
Yes.
At the celebration party, when the champagne's out and everybody's cheering, that's when it should have happened. I don't know what the hell is going on.
Yeah, if you didn't go in for the kiss after then, that was your time.
It's never going to happen at that point, yeah.
Yeah. Europa wants to know why Bernadette left. When all of a sudden, Isaac, those same Jupiter troops from before who were all damaged approach again. Tobia launches, and the Flints launch, Isaac, which means the Flints are back. How happy were you to see the Flints back in action?
I was ecstatic. I didn't think they'd come back, but once I saw them, I was like, okay, now this is clearly a sign that we've got quite a force that's going to be able to go toe-to-toe with the Jupiter remnants.
Like I said, Isaac, it's the same guys as that attacked Europa before, but this time they've strapped explosives to themselves and are basically trying to kamikaze the Crossbone Vanguard ship with Europa on it. And at first I thought, this is a very dark turn, but then I realized, no, that's just Jupiter. That's just how they are.
Yeah, it's a very Jupiter move. Like, I don't even think Zeon does anything remotely like this.
I don't think so.
No.
But of course, Isaac, they kind of just get beat up by Tobia. He slashes their explosives off. He saves one of the pilots, which earns him a bit of respect from Europa. And then Europa drops the bombshell on us that Dogatie's ultimate plan is still in motion, even though he's dead. Jupiter is constructing a colony laser capable of striking Earth from Jupiter called Zeus's Thunder. And at this point, I was like, of course it would be a colony laser. I don't think we mentioned that in our super weapon episode, Isaac, so I think we need to go back and amend it. What did you think when they revealed this? I've lost count now. 3rd, 4th, 5th colony laser?
I thought to myself at first, much like the characters, how can it hit Earth? It's in Jupiter. Like, the distance is mind-bogglingly far. And then very quickly, the characters started discussing it and pointed out that, yes, it's far, but it will still happen.
Yeah, so we begin Chapter 2 again. I'm just mentioning these chapter titles, listeners, because I think they're great. Chapter 2, The Bird That Danced on the Moon. We start talking about this laser. We find out, Isaac, that not only is Jupiter, building a colony laser, but they're, real serious about this. They're, more serious than anyone has been about their colony laser in the past, because Europa's like, yeah, by the way, they plan to fire the laser 2 weeks from now, and by the way, they're going to fire it 12 times as the Earth rotates just a little bit, and they're going to start with the Federation capital. They're being very thorough about this.
It's Jupiter. They do things very well. It's very well planned. None of this, half-planned Zeon stuff where you're always fighting against your sister or your brother.
Yeah, they go all in, for sure. Tobia is obviously upset. He says we have to go stop it. But Uman is like, hey, man, you should leave that to the Federation. And I bring this up because Uman mentions that they're still backed by nobility, which I thought was interesting. So what does that mean at this stage? Does that mean they're still backed by the Butch concern somehow?
I think so. And I think that was also just a callback to why are some of these people still with the Crossbone Vanguard? And, of course, he still believes in the ideals of Cosmo Babylonia and the whole aristocratic elite society. So I still want to fight for that, even though I'm not really fighting for that. I'm really just protecting Earth from insane, murderous militants on Jupiter.
Yeah, that's fair. So I assume that means one of your favorite characters, Sherry, is at least somewhat still supporting them.
I hope we see her again, because as we saw in the last one, she's got really a lot of power, even though it's very subtle, very understated.
So all the Crossbone here, they're upset because it's going to take 3 months to get to Jupiter, but the laser's firing in 2 weeks, Isaac. And they could get there if they still had the Mother Vanguard with its Minovsky drive and its sail of light. So the new director, Onmo, she's already been contacting people. Even Judah, Mr. Stoke, who's upset now that Jupiter was somehow able to build this colony laser right under his nose since he's doing his little shipping job. So, way to go, Judah. You didn't notice the giant laser being built.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to miss.
Look out the window, Judah. So Tobia's like, hey, you know what? We need to go visit SNRI on the moon because they're building this thing called the F-99, Isaac, and they're studying the sail of light from the Mother Vanguard, and he thinks that the F-99 is maybe what they need to get to Jupiter. And by the way, they need to go get some supplies from them anyway. So they head to the moon, and they see the F-99, Isaac, with the wings of light, which look like a mini version of the sail, which also looks like the wings of light if you've seen Victory Gundam on the V2 Gundam. But here we are about 20 years before Victory Gundam or so. So this is like a pre-version of the wings of light. So what was your thought when you first saw the F-99? So these are called the F-99 record breakers. Again, the Crossbones are actually the F-97s. Have you seen the color version of the record breakers, Isaac?
No, I haven't seen the color version. Is it Zeonic?
Sort of, yes. It's bright red and orange.
Okay, wow. Very Messer, right?
Yes, it is a very loud color scheme, which I guess makes sense because they're very fast.
Right. I mean, I saw them and I instantly thought, that looks Zeonic. Like, it almost looks like something a Neo-Zeon remnant would throw together. And then one of the characters kind of points out even, I think it's Otis. I think his name is Otis, the guy that runs SNRI, at least on the moon.
Yep.
he says it looks kind of not Federation-ish, but before we present it to them, we also, we're going to slap on a Gundam face and everything will be good. And I was like, aha, so the Gundam face is totally cosmetic. Like, it serves almost no use. I said, okay, very interesting, very interesting. So they went with the tried and true, simple, efficient Xeon approach with the very simple face. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely a different looking suit. I agree. It looks a bit Xeonic. It also looks a bit Victory Gundam like. Like I feel like we're bridging the gap between like the weird designs in Victory Gundam to what came before that. So
yeah, definitely.
And you mentioned Otis. He's also complaining that SNRI is basically bankrupt now because they were secretly providing the crossbones to the Crossbone Vanguard during the Jupiter War because he thought that they were going to be using them over in Jupiter, but then they went and brought him back to Earth as part of the war, and then they sold. He basically implies that the Crossbone Vanguard sold the crossbones to the Federation, which then revealed that SNRI had been working with them, and now no one wants anything to do with SNRI. So now he's hoping that basically they can sell the F-99 and get back on their feet.
Yeah, I guess so. This really comes down to, are they going to be successful right now?
Yes, which we'll see. I don't know.
Oh, boy.
So they make a bit of a plea. Tobia's like, hey, can we have him? And he's like, you know what? We'll give him to you because of your director, Onmo. He calls them like their SNRI's former idol. Does that mean that she used to work for SNRI? Or he just likes her? What did you take that to mean?
I was thinking, like, did she used to work there and she was, like, not so much the star pupil, but, like, the employee of the month, the employee of the year, something like that. So, like, they all are aware of her. But, yeah, that was such a weird thing to say because, like, I don't know. At first I thought, oh, God, is she going to be, like, a pop culture icon or something like that?
That's kind of what I took it to mean. I thought she was, like, like a pinup girl for SNRI or something. and he just had a crush on her, and he was like, oh, you know what? Well, you got her, so you can have the record breakers.
I thought she was going to be like the Taylor Swift of the moon or something like that, right?
Yeah, exactly. So Otis brings in his F-99 test team, which has 4 people, Isaac. We got Minoru Suzuki, and then 3 pilots, Derek, Jan, and Ulysses. And so Suzuki is kind of like, I don't know, they're
the lead test pilot.
Yeah. Minoru, or Suzuki, I'll call him, he says that an F-99 can get there in a week. But he says, Tobia, your plan's not going to work because you need at least 7 units to pull this off. That's a bit of an arbitrary number. Hasegawa is going for a 7 samurai angle here, I think, Isaac. If I was doing this, Isaac, I'd be like, give me as many people as I can. Like, what? Why do you need 7?
Well, they're scrounging up people since they don't really have enough. So they're hoping they can get to like 7 minimum. But right now, I don't even think they have 7 people.
Yeah, not really.
Or half that.
I mean, they've got Tobia plus those 3 guys, and that's kind of it.
They're technically not even combat pilots. They're testing the machine.
And then all of a sudden, Isaac, they are ambushed by mass-produced Jupiter Gundams. They don't have biobrains this time, but it's the same, hardware. Which, that's got to be terrifying, right? Because we saw the Jupiter Gundam basically have Judah and Tobia kind of at their knees last time. Now, it was being piloted by Amuro, or a version of Amuro. So, it's still not a good sign when multiple Jupiter Gundams show up.
No, it's not, especially with the moon and SNRI not necessarily being the most well-defended location.
Yes. That said, Isaac, the F-99s, they make short work of these Jupiter Gundams. They're so much more maneuverable. They've got their wings alight, and they kind of just slice them up. But then, Isaac, a 2-toned bird-looking mobile suit approaches and just straight up kills Jan and blows up his suit by slicing him up with, its claws. And Europa reveals that this is her little brother, the new Jupiter president. His name is Callisto's Shadow, and that bird mobile suit is called the Cornix. This thing is terrifying, Isaac. To me, it looks like there may be some listeners out there who've seen one of Tomino's other series called Aura Battler Dunbine, which we may review at some point on this show. It's basically like Fantasy Gundam. It looks like an Aura Battler from that show. It also looks like Femto, which is a version of Griffith from Berserk after he becomes like a god. Spoilers.
Spoiler alert for the 20-year-old anime series.
Yeah. And it also reminds me of a Chozo statue from Metroid and the character Sirius from Bomberman 64. So if you put all those things together, that's what this thing looks like. I don't know. What did you think of the Cornix, Isaac?
It's a death bird. And I think the original name, I imagine they wanted it to be Cornish, as in a Cornish game hen.
Oh, interesting.
Like the bird. Because, yeah, the other name doesn't quite mean anything. Sort of like how Tortuga was really should have been Tortuga and Turtle and all that, right?
Yeah, that's fair.
For whatever reason, the Jupiter Empire really loves animals. Like, they have no animals in Jupiter, so they really like the idea of like putting animals into mobile suits and mobile armors. But I saw this thing and I thought, okay, so the Jupiter Empire sent some little officer to go deal with the moon base. But that's not at all what happened, is it, Brian?
No, he's like literally half of the leadership.
As we find out.
I just, reminder, we're in chapter 2 of a 15-chapter series, and already the leader of the bad guys has shown up like on the good guys' doorstep, and he's like already just killing all their... So,
yeah.
I mean, again, I think we've talked about this before, but Hasegawa, the author, he's great at what you called raising the stakes last time, Isaac.
And may I just say that off the bat, he shows that he's completely different than Crux Dogatie, who didn't lead from the front lines.
100%. Yeah, he's out there doing the dirty work. Dogatie stayed back. I guess he went to the front line at the very, very end, and when he absolutely had to, because it wasn't going to work out. But this, yeah, you're right. He's leading off with like, I'm going myself.
Yeah, he's leading his troops into battle, and he didn't even bring that many.
No. I believe later on in this volume they say he brought probably about 20 Jupiter Gundams with him. So, a small strike force, bigger than what the Crossbone Vanguard has, but still very small, relatively. In the 3rd chapter, the demigod sings of despair. Europa says if he came in person, then he must know that the F-99s can reach Jupiter, and he's here to make sure that nothing disturbs the plan. She calls him, Isaac, the half human, half god, and he has this weird appearance. What does he look like?
He's like right down the middle of his face, and I assume the rest of him, he's two-toned. So the left side's one darker color, and the other side is a lighter color. It's very bizarre. It's very, I don't know if anyone here remembers like Street Fighter, but I think they were in Street Fighter Alpha 2, the new villain was named Gil, and he wanted to be a god, and he had the exact same paint structure. So I don't know, maybe this is something within Japanese or greater East Asian culture where the line down the middle and the two colors, guess what, that has godlike meaning of some kind.
I mean, it's also very yin and yang.
Yeah, maybe, yeah, power.
Strange.
But he's nuts. Just like his chosen paint, body paint, whatever it is, he's just as insane as Crux Dogatie, his predecessor.
Right, yeah, you'd think maybe they would like twist it and he'd be like super sane, but no, he's exactly as crazy as he looks. So, he calls Earth a vile planet, Isaac, and he can shoot backwards. The Cornix is special because its limbs can like move all directions. Like they're not limited to one directional movement from like a normal elbow joint. And so he's looking one way, but then he uses his arms to fire behind him, which kind of takes everyone by surprise. That's pretty genius. I'm surprised we hadn't seen that before.
Yeah, I liked how it really, I don't know, they called it a mobile armor, but it was really just a large mobile suit in a way, I guess, at least as far as I was concerned. But yeah, it really broke the mold of fighting like a human-shaped robot by rotating backwards and then even its own limbs rotating and then rotating again for more attacks.
The poor F-99 test team here, Isaac, they've already had one guy go down. The other two, Derek and Ulysses, they jump in. They're upset. This dude just killed their friend. So they go all out after this Cornix here. Tobia gets tied up with the Jupiter Gundams. And I thought this fight was interesting, Isaac, because it was weird to see Tobia in the Crossbone be so outclassed here by not only the enemy, but also his allies, because the Jupiter Gundam was developed from the X2, which Jupiter took once, what was his name?
Oh, Zabine?
Yeah.
I mean, not Zabine, Fabine. Because we still don't believe he was fully Zabine. It was an imposter.
Yeah, once Fabine defected, they used that to develop the Jupiter Gundam, and then once the Jupiter Gundam got defeated, supposedly, per the wiki, they developed the Cornix from the Jupiter Gundam. But the F-99s, they're way faster than the X-1, and they're attacking the Cornix, which is obviously faster than the X-1. So Tobia is just kind of a bit of a spectator here, Isaac. We went from Crossbone Gundam where the Crossbones were kind of the king. Like, yeah, they faced adversity, but they always came out on top. And here, he's just getting his ass beat.
In his defense, this thing attacks in a way that's very unconventional. It's a triple-jointed mobile suit.
Shadow strikes again right away. He knocks some rocks on Ulysses. He flips behind him, and he cuts him and his suit in half, Isaac. I mean, like, you saw his suit get cut in half, but then you also saw, like, in the cockpit, the dude got cut in half, too. Dear God.
Yeah.
This manga jumps between, like, funny, haha moments and then, like, dude getting cut in half. So it's pretty brutal.
He's got like beam talons that, much like a beam saber, they just go right through you. But they don't trigger the explosion right away. Unfortunately for the cockpit pilot. Yeah.
And then it turns out he has a beam cannon in the bird mouth of the Cornix, which he shoots at Derek, but Tobia uses the beam shield to block it, but it totally penetrates Tobia's beam shield and like wrecks the X1's shoulder, and it also hits Derek's F-99's wings of light. So if you're keeping track, listeners, there were 3 F-99s on the moon that we really needed to get to Jupiter in time. And Callisto's shadow has already destroyed basically all 3 of them. Two of them are completely done, and he just wrecked the wings on the 3rd one. So we've already seen, Isaac, the plan fail before it even started.
Really mopping the floor with what should be our powerful mobile suit team.
Yeah. The F-99 is the best thing we've got in the Earth sphere, apparently, at this point. And he just took out 3 of them. Now, granted, they were the test team.
If they're supposed to be fast, they should have been able to dodge the attacks, but
right.
Here we are.
Exactly. So now Tobia's fired up. He goes after the Cornix because now he's like, I can't let this dude destroy the last F-99. Like, we have to get to Jupiter. So he goes in close, but Shadow closes in quicker than he thought, and he uses this, I don't even know how you describe this weapon, Isaac. It's like he's got like a beam weapon on his rifle that you can kind of like pull over or like rake over an enemy with, and he just cuts off the X1's arms, slashes open its cockpit. Like, he's literally looking at Tobia now because the cockpit is gone. The X1 is completely like, it's totally defeated here. This is a bit shocking.
Well, things aren't looking good for our heroes.
Tobia asks Shadow, are you a new type? And he says, no, we are psychic. How do you what did you think at this point?
I thought, oh God, are they introducing like something post-new type? Like, what the hell does this mean? But as we quickly find out, everyone in the story is just as confused as we are when someone says they're a psychic.
Right, exactly. At this point, Europa jumps in and she tells Shadow to stop. And then here we get a bit of a, I don't want to call it diatribe here, Isaac, but Shadow he doubles down on Professor Karras's idea that Jovians are a different life form from people on Earth. He says by using Zeus's thunder, he plans to create chaos for 30 years. Basically, the resulting damage on Earth will cause people to sort of abandon the Federation for a significant amount of time. He says it's 30 years. And as a result, once those 30 years are over, there won't be anyone left that holds a grudge against Jupiter for doing so. And during that time, Jupiter will flourish, and that's his ultimate goal, is to make Jupiter flourish and to punish the Federation. And although millions of people will die, he thinks it'll be worth it. And this goes back to the same idea in the original series that says, when do humans that are on some other place become something else? And the Jovians are a different species than Earthlings. And I like that. I think that's a real sci-fi concept, Isaac, similar to new types that brings the series a little bit beyond just robots fighting each other.
Yeah, it's very, I don't want to say mature sci-fi, but for lack of a better phrase, I'll say it. The enemy isn't some insectoid xenomorph from another world, or the evil, purple-skinned space empire. We're the enemies. It's very George R. R. Martin. We don't need orcs, we don't need goblins and dark lords to be our enemies. Humans are always enemy enough to threaten the survival of our species and threaten everything good in the world.
At this point, Isaac, some Jupiter Gundams come in, and they pull Callisto's shadow away and tell him they need to leave because Phase 2 is beginning. So the heroes get a little bit of a reprieve here, a little bit convenient for the plot, but I'll go with it. On his way out, Shadow asks Europa, are you protecting Tobia because you've fallen in love with him? Isaac, poor Tobia, all these damn space princesses falling in love with him. I mean, this dude's just tripping over space royalty.
And refusing to kiss any of them.
The restraint that this man shows, apparently, is staggering.
He's got the fortitude of a monk.
The only thing at this point preventing Tobia from dying is the test team leader, Suzuki, comes out of nowhere in a flint, and he attacks, which gives Tobia a chance to kind of strike and get away. But then, Isaac, if all hope wasn't lost before, it's now definitely lost, because the whole SNRI Mobile Suit Factory explodes with all the F-99 data and all the spare parts. So not only did you lose the working version, but now you can't even build a new one. So that's pretty bad.
Yeah, and I imagine at least some of the engineering team is dead or injured. So
right.
We can't just hammer it out.
Yeah, people were in the building. I mean, what are you going to do? So they're all very sad. Shadow basically wins here. He retreats. Everyone is very sad, upset, and now they literally have no way to get to Jupiter. Chapter 4, a 6-day quest. The X-1 is being rebuilt after all that damage. Tobia starts reasoning out loud here, Isaac, that there has to be a reason that Shadow left. There has to be some other way that we could get to Jupiter. Something else that he must be concerned about. And I want to do a quick aside here, Isaac, because in the scans that we read, they kept changing between the distance to Jupiter. I think the first volume said 60 million kilometers, the second one said 600, the next one said 600 million. So, just to be clear, I looked it up. When Jupiter is at its closest point, it is 588 million kilometers away. That's 365 million miles. At its farthest, it's 968 million kilometers, or 601 million miles away. For reference, Earth is only 40,000 kilometers around. Jupiter completes one orbit around the Sun for every 12 Earth years. And in today's technology, one of the more recent missions, New Horizons, it took 13 months to get to Jupiter on a direct path. So Jupiter is really, really far away. Like, humans are bad at judging distance in space because our mind cannot comprehend that distance, but it is really, really far. So, I just want to clear it up. It's 600 million miles in this story, and that's at its closest.
I have very little knowledge of physics, but would a light from Jupiter of sufficient magnitude be able to be seen? Well, I guess it could be seen on Earth, but could this actually work? I know it's sci-fi, but I don't know.
Well, I mean, I would say it would greatly depend on how much energy you put out. I guess as long as there was nothing in the way, as Tobia points out, as long as there was nothing in the way, I don't see that it's that much different from like a gamma ray burst.
Okay. Well, it holds up in theory.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, someone out there who knows more than me can comment. I mean, it would have to be pretty darn powerful, though, Isaac.
Brian, do you think Jupiter, since they've been laying in wait for so many decades, do you think they observed the Marzion plan kind of fail? But that they were like, okay, their weapon failed, but in theory, it was kind of a correct attack strategy, right? You just need to time when you're going to strike Earth. We'll just strike with like an energy weapon instead of like an actual mass object we just throw.
And a key point here, Isaac, would be that it also does not depend on like a volcano that erupts every like 40 years and a really rickety engineering facility.
Built by like surviving pilots, not an actual engineering team.
I agree, though. Yeah, I mean, I feel like you have to take notice of that, right? If they didn't stop it there, it would have been more of a challenge, I guess, for the people of Earth. I mean, maybe they would have saw the projectile coming for a few years, and they could have just sent out a team to get rid of it, but who knows?
Yeah, exactly.
At this point, Isaac, Otis, who, by the way, I believe he also appears in Victory Gundam. I think this is the same Otis. It's been so long since I saw Victory Gundam, I would not have been able to tell you that, but I believe he's the engineer in Victory Gundam, also named Otis, so...
I can't recall that at all.
Yeah, me neither. So he's like, you know what, Tobia? The only thing I can think of is something called the Icarus. It's an Anaheim mobile suit they developed by scavenging pieces off of the broken and destroyed Mother Vanguard. And then SNRI watched them test from afar what looked like the wings of light on this mobile suit. However, they think that during the test, the Icarus went down and burned up in the atmosphere. And they show Tobia the tape, and he thinks it actually survived by using the wings of light as a shield for re-entry, like Kincade did in the X-1 in the original Crossbone Gundam. I really like this development, Isaac. I thought it was a cool mystery because it kind of like deepened the lore. I don't know. What did you think of this development?
On the one hand, I thought like, okay, where could this lead? But then I was like, do we have time? Because they're going to destroy the planet.
Yeah, time's a ticking, right? They said like 13 days, and
like we're kind of moving away from the threat.
Yeah. But you've got nothing else. I guess you got to follow up on it.
Sure, we'll see where this leads.
Bernadette, she's like, oh, well, I want to go to Earth with you, Tobia, to look for this Icarus thing because I want to find out what I believe in, like a real rah-rah princess statement. And Tobia's like, nah, it's too dangerous. You shouldn't go. But we know that she's going to stow away, right, Isaac? That's what she does.
Yeah, of course. That's how she ran into him in the first place.
Yeah, that's how we're in this whole mess to begin with. She stowed away at least twice in the first series, if not 3 times. So I think she's about to make it 4.
Yeah.
Otis gives Tobia the range where the Icarus landed, and he says go search. He takes his new X1 version, which is the X1 patchwork, Isaac. What did you think of this thing?
I saw it, and the first thing that struck to me was this is very asymmetrical for a Gundam.
Hey, that was the only parts they had, man. They slapped it together with X1 parts and X3 parts. Most importantly, the eye field arms.
I looked at it and I was like, this is a support Gundam because it's asymmetrical. It's probably being the one that's like hangs back and shoots from a distance with like a big cannon or something. I don't know. It was very interesting, and I'm glad we got to see a Gundam that wasn't, what we usually expect a Gundam to look like.
Yeah, it wasn't pretty.
No.
It basically let you know that the Crossbone Vanguard has hit hard times because they don't have a lot of left anymore. Europa's going to Tobia with Tobia to Earth. She gives him a locket with her lover, who's now dead. He died apparently 5 years ago fighting the pirates, to show that she's not in love with him. I didn't buy it for a second, Isaac. What do you think of this whole Europa, Tobia, Bernadette love triangle thing?
I don't know. It's sidetracking us from the main threat, and it feels very shoehorned in with as important as Europa is to Bernadette that she shows up now out of the blue. But yeah, I wonder like how long were they building this colony laser and she shows up now? She really had a long time, I assume, to get here.
Maybe it was hard for her to get out. Maybe she couldn't escape.
I suppose so. We'll go with that.
Director Onmo, she's on your side, Isaac, because she thinks Europa's a spy.
I mean, she very well might be.
I think I agree with her. I think it's plausible at this point, because it seems a little suspicious, right? She's showing up out of the blue all of a sudden when the colony laser comes out to play. Derek and Suzuki are going, too. We find out, Isaac, we got some cool lore backstory here. Suzuki, he saw Axis fall during Char's counterattack when he was 12. That made him want to be a Federation soldier. Turns out he's also Captain Harrison's teacher. And we'll find out later that Suzuki never really saw too much combat action, but that's a decent backstory, I think.
Yeah, it really ties together the UC and how really there's not a lot of peace, but also that some of the characters alive now saw events way in the past.
And Otis is really upset. He's saying, "Look, I lost all my stuff for the F-99. It's going to take us decades to get back to where we were on the Wings of Light." And that makes sense, because V Gundam takes place about 20 years in the future. So they almost had it, and it got set back by this one attack by Callisto's shadow. So again, it's kind of neat. Suzuki's really, again, focused on this 7-pilot idea. He's like, we need to find 5 more pilots. So on the way to find the Icarus, they're also going to be searching for pilots, Isaac. And in your mind, when you're reading this, who do you think they're going to go to?
I think they're going to go to Kincade.
Goddamn right, they're going to go to Kincade, Isaac.
Kincado.
So we'll see if they're able to recruit Kincade here. But I also want to point out at this point, we're in Chapter 4 now. Hasegawa has been drawing this series for, at least 4 issues. Europa's space cleavage is getting bigger. Just want to point that out to everybody.
It's the gravity. It's the gravity, Brian.
Her soul is definitely not weighed down by Earth's gravity. So Tobia is talking to Europa, and he asks her, what did he mean by psychic? And here's where Europa explains what this dude is. She says that he's actually 2 people. They're her twin brothers. They're her half brothers, Isaac. I think they share a mother, if I'm correct on that. But no matter how far apart they are, they can send she calls it their heart to each other and she says they can obtain that power. But basically they can see what each other is seeing no matter how far apart they are from each other. The other half, whose name is Callisto's Light, he's still at Jupiter, on the throne, but he's watching all of this through Callisto's Shadow's eyes. So she says they're one person in 2 bodies. How do you square that with the Universal Century lore? Do you attribute that to some misnamed new type ability, or do you think this is something just strange that we've never seen before?
I think it's something strange that we've never seen before. But at the same time, when I first heard them say 2 in 1 body, I thought, oh, this is a case of they conjoined down the middle. That's why there's that line. But I didn't think to mean... And then you turn the page, right, and you get to one of them's on the throne.
Yes.
Callisto's Light's on the throne, and then Callisto's Shadow is clearly, nearby in the Earth sphere. I thought, oh, that's clearly what they meant then, that there actually is a psychic connection of some kind. Okay, very weird, very very un-Gundam.
I agree, very little un-Gundam, but I'm still on board so far. We'll see how it goes. So at this point, Isaac, they're about to go into Earth to look for those pilots in the Icarus, and who stows away in the X1 but Bernadette?
Of course. That's her power. She can stow away.
Chapter 5, what awaits the search on the blue planet? So you were right, Isaac. The first stop they make is to Kincade. They go look for him. They find his bakery, but did you notice that his bakery's called Donkey's Bakery? What the hell's up with that? Why would you call your bakery Donkey's Bakery?
That's such a weird name. I didn't catch that. Donkey's Bakery.
Yeah.
Oh, comment below if you know what that means and you've read so far with us.
Is that a mistranslation, or am I missing a reference here? But
It's because the rolls have a kick. I don't know.
That's what it says on the business
the
card.
Spicy crossbone rolls.
But when we get there, Isaac, Tobia finds out that they have a newborn second child. So we found out in Skullheart they have a kid now, and we find out that they have a newborn now, and Tobia can't bring himself to ask Kincade to help because he just can't do it. He can't take him away from his family. So he leaves without asking Kincade, and without even seeing him, Isaac doesn't even approach him. But it increases his motivation that he has to stop Jupiter so that nothing will happen to Kincade and his family. How'd you feel about that, Isaac? I mean, that kind of ends Kincade's assistance here.
It really was something I didn't see coming. And at the same time, I kind of felt glad. Cecily and Vera, depending on what your thoughts on were the name, and Seabook / Kincado, they really earned their happy ending. They did what they had to do to save the world. So maybe they should be left in peace. This is something that we really don't see often enough in Gundam. You kind of keep getting recalled into combat until you die. Or until the enemy finally dies. But even that never happens, right? Because even if a series is ended, there's manga that comes after.
Yeah, if you sortie enough, Isaac, your number eventually comes up, right?
Yeah, keep rolling those dice.
Yeah, they have a nice ending, so it is a little nice that he's not put in harm's way, I guess. But at the same time, there's not a lot of like great pilots left.
Yeah, and as far as pilots go, he's kind of undefeatable too, because you can kind of take out a Divinidad toe-to-toe.
At this point, Suzuki reveals that they have another unit. They found another unit. It's a Gundam F90, Isaac, which is exciting to me because, again, I like when we see stuff from past series. And if you've read F90 and all the other stuff or listened to our podcast, you'll know that there were a total of 3 F90s built, and he's still calling it the F90. So I assume this has to be Unit 1, Isaac, which is the same Gundam F90 that we saw in the original Gundam F90 manga, and also the same one that was in the Formula Wars video game for the Super Nintendo.
It was so iconic, it had to come back.
So iconic in a one-off manga and a Super Nintendo game that likely no one played.
God, that game was a nightmare.
There's more Europa and Bernadette boobs as they take a dip in the hot spring together to help Europa adjust to Earth. What an excuse, Isaac.
I mean, cue the tasteful nudity.
So the next person they go to find, they're going to go dig up the Death Gale squad. So I guess that was my next thought as well, if they needed some people. If you're not going to go to Harrison.
Wait a minute, why is Harrison on the list? Like, he was not doing great.
Yeah, well, those new type monkeys, man, they're hard to beat. But I mean, we're not aware of any other Federation aces, right?
No, but like Harrison's only like benefit was that he listened to them. He was saved by them and he decided to help them along. Like he wasn't exactly slapping around Jupiter suits left and right.
Yeah, true. I mean, maybe he did have trouble with like the Divinidods, I guess, but maybe he did okay in the background against like the normal suits. I'll have to give him that benefit of the doubt.
Sure, we'll say that. He's good at surviving.
But next up is one of your favorite characters, Burns.
I didn't expect to see Burns back, but as soon as I knew they were on Earth, they were going to go to the Death Gale squad, that Burns would be at the top of the list because he's very gung-ho about helping them. He practically joined them, let's face it.
He did right away. He also has some very ominous words, Isaac, which doesn't make me feel good for Burns' future here.
Oh, no.
Yeah, Tobia shows up. He's like, hey, Burns, you want to join? He's like, hell yeah, I'm ready to give my life for this cause. And I was like, oh, man, well, you're going to die. Like, this isn't going to go well.
I mean, yeah, he's been wanting to die for a while, I think.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a lot left to live for. What's he going to do, chop wood till the rest of his days?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I mean, he's out there, living in the woods, chopping wood. So, yeah, he had a touching thing to say to Toby. He said, your actions have given me the ability to live longer, and because of that, I'm thankful, and it's time for me to risk my life here. So, next they go find Giri, or Giri. What do we call him?
Giri.
All right.
Now, it's not that, though. It's Chef Giri.
What did you think of Chef Giri?
I thought this really came out of nowhere. I had no idea he would be in such a refined line of work since he was a bit of a homicidal maniac the last time we saw him. So, yeah, this was quite the comedic surprise.
Do you think that Hasegawa was just watching a lot of Kitchen Nightmares and he was like, I need a Gordon Ramsay. We're going to turn Giri into Gordon Ramsay?
Yeah, maybe. Or he was like, what's the most left field thing I could think of this person being? Circus? No, that's too Gundam Wing. We'll make him a chef.
Well, all the characters share your surprise, Isaac, and they're just shocked. They're like, this dude can't be a chef. But then they try his food, and they're all amazed. And I believe one of them says, what Titanic flavor? I don't know. Like, Hasegawa, his manga's really funny. It makes me laugh all the time, which is hard to do, and particularly in Gundam. It's a weird tone to get comedy into a Gundam manga.
Yeah, but sometimes it works. You kind of need that random occurrence, and here I think it worked pretty well.
So Giri refuses. But then Europa reveals herself and requests that he help stop her brothers. And he is shocked, Isaac, that they became the president. But then immediately he tells Tobia and all of our pals that they are fools because she can never betray them. And now you're like, uh-oh, she was a spy, Isaac. Like, this is the big twist for Volume 1. And then, boom, the Jupiters show up in some mobile suits, including Shadow. He's here on foot. He sees Giri, and Giri sees him. And that's where we end Volume 1. So we're about to see some stuff go down between Giri and Shadow. So overall, Isaac, what did you think? Anything we didn't talk about in Volume 1 you want to bring up? Or what were your overall thoughts on Volume 1?
Number one, the Earth Federation has once again shown how painfully inept it is at keeping people off Earth who shouldn't be on Earth. Because our heroes managed to get there with minimal damage from an automated weapons satellite. And Jupiter showed up too.
True. So. Yes. For all we know, like maybe he cut a swath through their defense. I don't know, but you're right. It does seem like everyone's moving about a little bit freely.
Yeah, as usual, the Federation's military is nowhere to be found.
Is it because other than this is a time of relative peace? Are they just asleep at the wheel here?
I think they're asleep at the wheel again. They assume Jupiter's gone. They're not really a threat. We took out their main fleet and army. Yeah. So this remnant, even though they just have a handful of mobile suits, they're clearly still able to kind of zip around wherever they want in the Earth sphere.
Yeah, that's fair.
But overall, I mean, I'm hooked. I'm ready for the ride. I really enjoyed it. I had no idea the threat would be this scale of world-ending doom. I had no idea Steel 7 would kind of take us back into like, okay, the world's in trouble. And here's the countdown. Just like in, Crossbone Gundam, the world was in trouble. Here's the countdown. How about you, Ryan? What do you think?
Yeah, I like it. I was hooked. So I've also read Volume 2. I think Volume 2 is really good. It gets better. Just like Crossbone Gundam, I think we're improving as we go, which is good. I think that's something you want to see and is a mark of a really good story. I'm also really happy, Isaac, that Jupiter coming back is not like, oh, by the way, we had another fleet. It's very much the same as last time. So while it is a little odd that they like came back and unexpected, at least they don't have like all these forces that they didn't use or something, or because that's kind of what happened in like the sequel trilogy, right, for Star Wars. Like all of a sudden there was just like the Empire was back, but just like with a different name.
Yeah, exactly. I guess they put all their money into the colony laser, right? Because we don't see really any capital ships. We see them kind of get dropped off by a transport on Earth, but that's about it for the Jupiter Empire. I honestly thought it was going to be a lot like Skullheart, where we might get sort of mini stories or one smaller scale story where the Jupiter remnants kind of show up. But no, this is like absolutely Jupiter's is still the threat. And I still don't get how they're going to save the day. And I don't mean that as like, the old-timey radio announcer, like, how will our heroes survive? Or anything like that. I mean, they're still in the Earth sphere and they have like, how much time has passed? A day?
Yeah.
So we're that many hours less to get to Jupiter and blow up this colony laser, which granted, in our experience, they're pretty fragile, but you have to get there to shoot it. And knowing the Jupiter Empire, it's at least going to be as well defended as they can make it.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be an uphill battle for sure. And time's ticking in different ways, right? Like, so they have to find a way to get there. And then they have to like adapt it. If this mobile suit supposedly went down, it's going to be broken. Like, they're going to have to fix it and then fly it there. But then how does that work? Like, are you able to take people with you? Can you install it on a ship? Like, how are you going to get all 7 units or whatever you're going to take over? They don't even have 7 units, by the way, Isaac. They still only have Tobia's crappy X1. Apparently they have an F90, which, like, I like the Gundam F90, but that thing's 15 years old at this point. So they got 2 suits and some flints.
They technically don't even have Giri yet.
Right.
So...
But it's not like he comes with a mobile suit. They blew his up, remember? So they, I don't know. The situation is dire for our heroes.
Brian, do you predict the Jupiter Empire is going to pull a Girin? At some point later in the story, they're just going to fire that weapon early. They're going to be like, you know what? We're going to get close to losing. A bunch of Gundams are here. Just shoot.
Yeah, I do. I think that's a rule, right? When you make a super weapon in your story, that you have to fire it. You have to push the button.
Yeah. I'm kind of predicting one of these suits that's attacking their heroes at the end of Volume 1. I have a feeling that they'll be able to capture one and it'll be operational and Giri will take that one. Like they'll knock out the pilot or something like that. Like, yeah, because Giri, I don't see him going back into like a mole suit from the Earth sphere.
Yeah, I agree. He has to be in a Jupiter suit of some kind. So I would have liked to see them take a Jupiter Gundam, Isaac. I thought that would have been cool.
Ooh, damn, that'd be so cool, yeah. Well, knowing them, they're going to run into one when they get to the Jupiter sphere.
Yeah, true.
We'll see one, but not in the way we want.
So yeah, that's Volume 1, everybody, of Steel 7. In terms of Haros, Isaac, I think I'd give it a solid 8 out of 10. The story's just starting, so I don't think I've seen enough yet to go into the 9 territory, but I really liked it. I really enjoyed it, and I'm excited to read the next one. Yeah,
I'm right there with you. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5, even though it feels very much like we're playing the same beats of Crossbone Gundam. It's taken us into a well-done sequel story where the threat's pretty big, pretty major, and our heroes are once again under the clock to save the day. So I'm enjoying it. It's not a complete retread, and I'm curious about what happens next for the next 2 volumes.
And the last thing I have to say, Isaac, is they're going after the Death Gale Squad, Isaac, which means the Europa and Rosemary Raspberry are going to be together. The 2 most voluptuous Jupiter women out there are going to be in the same story. So
hopefully it's animated with, shall we say, discretion for the sake of the story and not pure fan service.
Yeah, I don't think half of this stuff is going to make it into the anime version. It's particularly all of the Bernadette shower scenes. So
we really don't need the hot spring.
Nope, don't think we need the hot spring.
It adds nothing. Like, I know Europa's new to Earth and stuff, but I'm not sure she'd be wowed by a hot spring compared to things like, trees and animals and the stars and sunlight. All
right, everybody, make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Isaac, take us away.
All right, listeners, before you go to sleep tonight, stand next to your bed, get on your knees, put your hands together, look up at the ceiling, and hail Crux Dogatie's memory.
Good night, everybody.